What do you think about the terrorist attack that happened at Krakow City Hall? Well, that's a topical question. Alright, let me start by saying what I don't think, rather than what I do. I heard, or rather people told me, that even some well-known respected Orthodox clergy said very frightening things. But I don't think the way they do, namely that it happened during Lent, on the first week, on a Friday. And people were engaged in such activities that God punished them for it. I don't think so. Let me be clear, at most 0.5% of Russians today are Orthodox Christians. If pious Orthodox Christians went there, you could hold them accountable and ask, what were you doing there? Why would you even go? But the majority are non-believers. What's the point of asking them anything? They haven't committed to anything. As a sinful person myself, I'm Orthodox and I regularly partake in communion on feast days and confess, thus giving God a vow to reject Satan and unite with Christ. I've pledged to live by God's standards. If I so much as set foot there, they certainly have slapped me down and rightly torn me to pieces. But non-believers, what do they know? How can they be held accountable? It's like judging a cat for stealing sausages. Does it understand? No, it just wants to eat. They live by animal laws, passions and vices. How can you hold them accountable? Read the Holy Scriptures, for example, the Apostles' letter to the Romans. What does he say about the widespread practices back then? It was known by different names in different forms, but the essence was the same. Wealthy Roman patricians, for example, had both mistresses and male lovers, and it wasn't hidden. Emperors would adopt their lovers and live openly like that, and it was accepted as normal. The famous Spartan phalanx, remember? We studied Sparta in school. Those were men warriors, practically unbeatable. Do you know how the phalanx was formed? In two lines, paired with an active partner in front and a passive behind. Homosocial behavior was the norm. And the apostles didn't condemn it directly. Why? There was a general condemnation, but no specific censure, because that's how they lived. It was their norm. In the Islamic world, harems are the norm. In Tibet, polyandry is the norm. Before you question someone, you probably need to teach them first, and before teaching, you must show an example. Have we demonstrated a true godly life? Have we inspired people to want to live according to God? Only then can you question someone's commitment to living by God's ways if they pledged to do so and are taking communion. Maybe, then God would allow punishment for that reason. But what about those who haven't made such commitments? So, what do I think? First, I don't think as many as some say that this is God's punishment. No, these people live without God. God isn't present in their lives. They've renounced God and shut Him out. There's no God in their lives. We can't expect from them what we expect from ourselves. The standards differ between those who are still spiritually infants and those who have reached spiritual maturity. That's my first point. If I had been there, well, that would be different. Then I should be drawn and quartered, and rightly so. So that's the first point. The second point is that we're living in an era where such events, including terrorist attacks, have become the norm. It's time to get used to it. This is happening worldwide. It's a characteristic of our times. It won't get better, it will get worse. If you don't want this to happen to you, well, I personally don't want it to happen to me, and even less so to my children and grandchildren. That's partially why I don't live in Moscow or in a big city. I live surrounded by nature, in a kind of paradise. From my house windows, I don't see streets. My house is nestled with gardens. There are pines outside the windows, the Volga nearby, a field over there. Foxes run by, quails fly around, rabbits scamper. No one ever passes by. It's a dead end. Peace, quiet, nature, beauty. Who would come all the way here from a terrorist group? Even if they did, how many could they harm? 2 or 3? Maybe they'd take my cat too. And what then? These acts happen where people gather in large numbers. So, if someone chooses to live in a crowded area, they should accept the consequences of that choice. During the COVID year, people were locked in their apartments. People who visited told me that the others were going mad, and someone told me about extreme reactions, especially from the elderly. It was odd to hear some of these things. People were so terrified of losing their lives. One lady in her 80s, trembling at that thought of getting infected and dying, said to me, "Father, I no longer go to church. I haven't taken communion for over a year. I can't risk it." I asked, "Why can't you? Who told you not to?" She replied, "Well, COVID, what if I catch it and die?" I told her, "You won't die suddenly. You will die on schedule. Your time is already set." She was over 80. Isn't that funny? She was acting like a child, thinking she'd die suddenly. If people choose to live in cities like ant colonies, surrounded by crowds, they should expect all of the consequences of their choice. That's my second point. Third, as our Orthodox believers, we're called to pray. Among the deceased, I'm sure there were a few baptized individuals, and for them, we should pray that the Lord receive their souls. We should also pray for the grieving family members. Perhaps, through this sorrow, some hearts may turn to God or draw a meaningful lesson from it. In practice, it means praying for the deceased and for the grieving relatives who are suffering from this tragedy. That's my feeling about it.